Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hapaday Zantiro, welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Harris. Our guest today is an individual in our community who was recognized by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council last year at their anniversary for his contributions to the council. He's basically expressed a lot of interest in the council programs, helped the council by giving a lot of feedback, and we thought it would be interesting to sit down with this individual and hear from him about his life and a little bit about maybe what has gotten him so interested in the humanities. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Ken Baer. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you.
Of course, some people would know you as being married to Ana Cabrera Baer from here in the CNMI. You've been back to Saipan for a few years now. And one of the things that you mentioned when we were preparing for the show is that you consider yourself something of a lifetime activist. How did this come about?
I don't think you're born with it. It probably comes through naturing. But during my early experiences, I said early, probably after high school and college and service and in the Army, I became involved in social programs in my home in Pennsylvania, and became more and more active as you get more and more involved, particularly with other people, other ethnic and racial groups of people. And that was sort of started me on a way that I hope I've never left.
Well, looking at all of the things that you've done in your lifetime, I don't think you've left that path you started on. You mentioned that one of the things or the first step in this was becoming involved in some kind of poverty program in the United States?
Yeah, I had my education in education. I had achieved a master's degree from Temple University in counseling and guidance, and worked in high schools, but managed to get a job with a university consortium in eastern Pennsylvania, and was working there. And when the Johnson area came and the economic program was introduced, we, a collective group of people who were interested in taking that support that was coming from the government at that time and seeing if it would have applications in our community. We were searching and searching. We put a program together, an application. It was funded, and we didn't seem to be able to find the right person to be involved in it and guide it along the way. We needed professional people. I was comfortable in the directorship at the university group at that time, but one of the persons in the group that we had put this program together said, "Ken, when are you going to put your body where your mouth is?" So probably at that moment was defining. I realized that I was doing this from a comfortable position, but now would I get it? So he said, "Why don't you at least temporarily take the job?" And I said, "Okay." So I had to resign from a rather enjoyable job and took this one. And little did I know what was in store, but it came, and it came like an avalanche.
Now, you made your first visit to Saipan in 1968. I dare say about half of our audience probably wasn't even born then, including myself. What were your impressions of the island back then? And that's also when you met your wife, I understand.
Yeah. Well, that avalanche that I was talking about lasted about 3 years, and it was on the line battle with the poverty program, and I was after that period of time, I was sort of in pretty sad shape. Psychologically and what have you. And so I then left the program in Harrisburg and got into working with the federal government and was doing mostly contract work with them throughout the states. And then one day they called me into the office and said, would you like to do us a favor? We have a program out in Micronesia, and we need a person to go there. On the spur of the moment, I said, okay. I wasn't sure where Micronesia was, but I remembered after learning about Saipan and my history and in my period of time and the war and what have you. I knew a little bit about it, so I looked at it as a new and maybe revitalizing experience. And so that's how I got here. And, I thought for a moment I was in paradise. It's taken me a while to learn otherwise, but... And while here, in those first months and years, I met a lot of wonderful people. And in the process of time, I met a young lady here in Saipan and became a bit infatuated. But I had a limited time here, and we just had a few moments or times together, but agreed that, like they do now with the internet, carry on relationships. Only then you had to sit down and write a letter. Mm-hmm. And it became a hard copy permanent record. So what you said, you had to be careful and mean what you said. So that was part of it. And I guess over several years, we communicated, and then finally decided we'd try to get together, and we did. And it seemed, at least for the moment, that things would work out, even though I thought we were kind of came from two very, very separate worlds.
Well, you literally did, practically.
Yeah.
Opposite sides of the globe. Another part of your history that's important to mention is your work in the civil rights movement. And one thing that's been in the headlines recently is the protests in Standing Rock, North Dakota. And that kind of struck a personal chord with you. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I get a lump in my throat every time I really kind of see what's going on now in the nations, the indigenous people nations in the United States. They've suffered long and and suffered badly over many, many years, and are reduced in numbers to a very small fraction. I think it's less or close to 1% of the population of the United States. But I worked in the poverty program and in the civil rights movement before the poverty program, mostly with Afro-American. And I consider two of my brothers that are about my age that we kept close touch with over the years. Both are Afro-Americans. But in the process, and after spending time out here and trying to get somewhat accustomed to to foreign cultures and what have you, I did go back to the States. Anna and I were married at that time, and I had taken a job with an NGO called Save the Children, and they asked me to direct what was the Indian or Native American program at that time, and I spent some of that time in Standing Rock. And so the thing that really hit me hard when I saw the demonstrations, which I was hoping would come to a good conclusion, but it seems that it's not in that direction. But when I saw what was going on, when they were trying to break it up with a militarized police force, I spent time in North Dakota, and it's cold, and when it's below freezing, it's treacherous. And when I saw the demonstrators being sprayed in a sub-zero temperature with water, and these were children of people that are grandchildren of people that I knew, I cried. I couldn't believe that the beast in mankind was so prominent in my country at this time, that people could begin to teach each other or treat each other because of difference of opinions and difference of thought in that manner. But I'd witnessed it over and over many times in my life, but nothing to this. At my age, it affected me probably as deeply as this did.
Well, we're speaking today with Ken Baer, Saipan resident, about his experiences and just really sitting down and talking story with him today. And we'll be back after this break.
Half a day. This is Eulalia Areola of the Northern Marianas Humanities Council. Did you know that you can donate up to $5,000 to the Humanities Council through the CNMI Education Tax Credit Program? Donations from individuals and corporations qualify and can be used to offset your local wage and salary tax, BGRT, and earnings tax. Call our office at 235-4785 to see how you can support humanities programs in our community and obtain a tax credit for your donation. Sizuus Maasi, Olomai, and thank you.
Welcome back to Your Humanities Half Hour. We're speaking today with Saipan resident Ken Baer about his life as an activist and in some ways a student of the world and its cultures. Ken, you kind of alluded to, I think, that you were back in the Pacific, and you were also involved with the Peace Corps.
Yeah, in the late 70s. My wife and then family with our two daughters traveled to a new job that I had taken with the Peace Corps to the Fiji Islands, wonderful people. I often remember well the trips into the bush and the times we had with our friends and families down there. So it was a brief time, 3 years, but I've been privileged sometimes, maybe at my wife's wondering where we were going to go to next. But I've been privileged to being able to travel quite a bit. And after the Peace Corps, working with NGOs, I was able to spend some time in Western Samoa, now Samoa, among those folks. And we have lasting friendships there. And out in an atoll and similar to atolls up here in Kiribati, and we spent 3 years there. There wasn't much bush, but there's a lot of ocean and a lot of sand. And after that, through Hawaii, I spent some time working on the program in Hawaii, and then managed to find our way back to the States. At that time, I went without having a job ahead of me. We decided that we were going to travel a little bit, so the family and I traveled around, sort of around the world. We traveled, kept going west until we came to the eastern part of the United States and started traveling there from up in Maine. I had friends up there, and we had some Peace Corps volunteers that we had met that had invited us there. So we had a little bit of time with the New England folks, and I managed to go on down to the south, and I had a friend down there, Mike Clark, and I visited him at what was a folk school that had been created years ago by a dedicated activist from Tennessee.
By the way, what is a folk school?
It's not common here in this, or wasn't common here in the States, but in the Netherlands, where Miles Horton, who founded the school in Tennessee, when he was doing his work at the seminary in New York, at the Union Seminary in New York, part of that was a year or so in folk schools in the Netherlands, and he was attracted with it. And basically, it's mostly in rural areas, but it's not necessarily there. Ours was in eastern Tennessee, but it served Appalachia area, as well as all the way down to Lookout Mountain and over into the Carolinas. And we had weekend workshops, people who were miners' unions, in the coal mining areas. And we did work in the communities, as well as had week-long weekend workshops on various subjects. Black lung was a problem with coal miners, and also struggle in unionizing and those sorts of things. So it was a socialist-oriented school because of because of Miles Horton and Mike Clark. And we spent a couple years there, enjoying the culture of the South and the rural South and the Appalachia and the mountains. I had lived close to Appalachia in eastern Pennsylvania, but we were immersed in it. And that was the nice thing about traveling and being in these places, even though it costs us probably economically and sometimes painfully to move from place to place. But being immersed almost everywhere we were in the cultures, I think for Anna as well as myself, so it wasn't just some American that was having an experience. I think it was a Chamorro as well. So we had, we were fortunate. I considered, when I was at the stage of retirement, I almost, I didn't want to retire, although I had promised Anna that we would, after she had struggled with moving from place to place and managed in the time in between to get a degree from Capilano College and from the University of New Mexico in Fine Arts and a master's degree in art therapy. So she came back here to work, and I promised her that I would at least settle down for a while anyhow. So, but I retired and came back here almost 20 years ago, and spent time farming and gardening mostly here.
In your time learning about all these different cultures, you mentioned you traveled around the world, is there anything you find, or what do you feel is most common among humanity in all of these cultures that you've met?
Well, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to really identify anything. Sometimes you think we're at war with each other, and that's our common thing. But basically, we're all born into this world, and as creatures of the human race, and that there's the capacity in us all to become the most loving, kind, and peaceful creatures that there is. It's just that we have to struggle with our demons in the process. There's a Jewish word that's called Yetzer Hara. It means evil inclinations, and I think in their culture that is believed, and I think, and I believe it, that there's a force that comes with our creation that has a negative effect. It helps us with our creativity, but it also helps us with with the evilness that we can create. And so what is it that we all have that I always search for is that, I suppose is the capacity to love one another. Yeah.
Well, before I came for our show this morning when I was having breakfast, I was having a quiet moment, wanted to find something peaceful to watch on YouTube while I was having my bowl of cereal, and I found Oprah Winfrey's Super Soul Sunday episode, and it was with a Buddhist monk from Vietnam named Thich Hat Han, I believe is the way you pronounce his name. I found it very profound. In fact, I couldn't even finish the show because I needed to stop and think about what he was saying, similar to what you're saying. And lo and behold, Ken, I come to our interview, and you have brought a book written by this monk. And as we come to the close of our show today, you wanted to share an excerpt. What is it, number one, about this book that attracts you?
Well, I've experienced a lot of cultures and the religions that bloomed in those various cultures and the various religions that are there, and practiced for a while Zen Buddhism while I was in the States. And Thich Nhat Hanh is a suffering Buddhist, Vietnam Buddhist, who was trying to bring peace to all sides in that struggle. And he became one of the Buddhists that I read quite a bit.
Share with us now the passage that you have selected for us.
Oh, I appreciate that. Promise me this day, promise me now while the sun is overhead, exactly at the zenith, promise me. Even as they strike you down with a mountain of hatred and violence, even as they step on you and crush you like a worm, even as they remember and disremember and disembowel you, remember, brother, remember, man is not our enemy. The only thing worthy of you is compassion, invincible, limited, and unconditional. Hatred will never let you face the beast in man. One day, when you face the beast alone, with your courage intact, your eyes kind, untroubled, even if no one else sees it, out of your smile will bloom a flower, and those who love you will behold you and crossed 10,000 worlds of birth and dying. Alone again, I will go on with bent head, knowing that love has become eternal. On the long, rough road, the sun, the moon, will continue to shine.
We've been speaking today with Ken Baer about his experiences throughout his lifetime. Ken, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing.
You're quite welcome.
Any final thoughts before we go?
Well, remember when you get up tomorrow morning to love someone.
Well said. This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Harris.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.